Aloha everyone. Welcome to our second lecture video for the estimation of parameters. So for our lecture video, we'll be discussing interval estimate of the population mean with unknown population standard deviation or simply the t-distribution. So let's proceed. The learning objectives. So I already discussed in our previous lecture video, I already discussed or presented the learning objectives. So let's proceed with the definition now for the t-distribution. All right, so for t-distribution, it is used when the sample size is less than 30 and the variable is normally distributed or at least approximately normally distributed. So in our previous discussion for Z distribution, ginagamit natin siya yung Z distribution or the formula for confidence interval for the Z distribution if the population standard deviation is known and our sample size is greater than or equal to 30. Now, for T distribution, we're going to use it if our sample size is less than 30 and the population standard deviation is unknown. All right, so let's proceed with the characteristics of the T distribution. So the T distribution is similar to the standard normal distribution in the following ways. So first is it is a bell shape. Second, it is symmetric about the mean. Third, the mean, median, and mode are equal to 0 and are located at the center of the distribution. And last is the curve never touches the x-axis, or simply, it is asymptotic to the horizontal axis. So I hope that you can still remember the properties that we have for the normal distribution. All right, so let's proceed with the different. So the T distribution is different to standard normal distribution in the following ways. Number one, the variance is greater than 1. Number two, the T distribution is actually a family of curves based on the concept of degrees of freedom, which is related to sample size. 3, as the sample size increases, the T distribution approaches the standard normal distribution. Now, ano ba yung tinatawag natin na degrees of freedom? So, degrees of freedom, these are the number of values that are free to vary after a sample statistic has been computed. And they tell the researcher which specific curve to use when a distribution consists of a family curve. And we have a formula in finding the degrees of freedom. So that is n minus 1. As we define or as we define degrees of freedom, this is related to the sample size. So again, the formula we have for degrees of freedom is n minus 1. So please take note of this formula. All right. So let me present to you the formula for the confidence interval for the mean, again, when the population standard deviation is unknown and our sample size is less than 30. So this is the formula. So we have x with a bar on top that stands for the sample mean minus d alpha over 2df. So that is what we call the t value times s that stands for the sample standard deviation since our population standard deviation is unknown over square root of n. So n is for sample size. So that is for our lower limit. And for upper limit, we have x with a bar on top plus t alpha over 2 df times s over square root of n. Now, ano yung ba yung pagkakaiba ng formula na to doon sa Z distribution? Okay, so kung mapapansin nyo, instead of the Z alpha over 2, we're using here the T alpha over 2 df or the T value. Okay, so let's have a recap. For the Z distribution, we have we have a table, and we have four most likely used confidence level. We have the 90, the 95, the 98, and the 99 confidence level. And for that confidence level, in relation to that confidence level, we have the z values for each of them. Now, for the t distribution, we'll be using the t value. So, paano natin to makukuha? Using the t distribution table. Okay? So, provided naman na kayo ng t distribution table, so yun yung gagamitin natin in finding the t value. Okay? So next, ano ba yung pagkakaiba, the difference between the z distribution and t distribution? So instead of the notation sigma, we're using here the notation S for sample standard deviation. Okay? So instead of sigma, we're using here S, or the sample standard deviation. Okay. Now, for the margin of error, this is the formula. So, T alpha over 2 df times S over square root of n. So, this is our formula for the margin of error. Now, for the standard error naman, for T distribution, that is S over square root of n. Again, please take note of the formula for the margin of error. Let me repeat. So that is T alpha over 2 df times S over square root of n. So this is the formula for the margin of error for the T distribution. Now, for the standard error naman, for the T distribution, we have S over square root of n. Okay. So, let's practice first yung paghanap ng T value. So, let's have this example. So find the T alpha over 2 value for a 95% confidence interval when the sample size is 18. So again, we will use here the T distribution table in finding the T alpha over 2 value. So paano natin nahanapin yung T alpha over 2 value? Given na yung ating confidence level is 95% at yung sample size natin is 19. So again, we need to know its properties. So sabi doon sa problem, it's 95%, therefore our alpha is 5% or 0.05. So that's intended for two tails, 0.05. Next is our degrees of freedom. Again, the formula we have for degrees of freedom is n minus 1. So we will have here ang ating sample. In our example ay 19. So 19 minus 1, so our degrees of freedom is 18. Next. So we need to find the T alpha over 2 value. So that is for one tail. So we need to divide the two tail by 2. So we'll have 0.05 divided by 2. Ang degrees of freedom natin ay 18. So we'll have T alpha T 0.025 comma 18. So this is now the value na hanapin natin sa ating table. Okay. So sabi ko kanina, yung 0, ang hinahanap natin ay T alpha over 2. So that's for one tail. So ang hanapin natin ay yung 0.25. Okay? So 0.025 yung hanapin natin. Okay, on the upper top row. So since yung problem natin na hinahanap natin ay yung T alpha over 2, so that's for one tail. So hanapin natin doon yung 0.025. Okay, pero the same lang naman, if alpha yung ginamit natin, you can have here 0.05. Okay? Next is, mapapansin nyo, yung nasa first column is meron ditong nakalagay na notation na DF that stands for degrees of freedom. So, yung degrees of freedom natin ay 18. So, again, class, hindi natin gagamitin yung sample size. Ang gagamitin natin ay yung degrees of freedom. Yung formula natin dyan ay n minus 1. So, 19 minus 1, so 18 yung ating hahanapin. Okay? So, the intersection of the two will be the t-value. Okay? So, we have here 2.101 as the t-value for this example. Okay? So, that's for finding the t-value. So, let's have another example. Find the T alpha over 2 value for a 98% confidence interval when the sample size is 22. So again, T alpha over 2 meaning to say we're looking for the one tail value for a 98% confidence interval. So, ano yung kailangan natin isa-alang-alang? First is yung confidence level. So, confidence level natin, again, is 98%. So, yung alpha natin is 2% or 0.02. Degrees of freedom natin, so yung ating sample size is 22, so 22 minus 1, so that's 21. So, since yung alpha natin ay 0.02, divide lang natin sa 2, since we're talking about one tail, so we'll have here 0.01, and again, yung DF natin ay 21. So, ito yung mga value na hanapin natin. For one tail, ang hanapin natin or locate natin ay yung 0.01, and yung sa degrees of freedom naman or DF ay yung value na 21. So again, for one tail, that's 0.01. So that would makikita natin yan on the upper top row of our table. And for the degrees of freedom, that's 21. Again, the intersection is our t-value. So for this given example, the t-value is 2.518. So as easy as that. Okay? So that's how you find the t-value. So kung again, doon sa z-distribution, meron lang tayong apat na kailangang i-memorize. Like for the 90%, we have 1.645. For the 95, we have 2.33, 1.96 rather. And for 98, we have 2.33. And for 99, we have 2.575. Dito sa t-distribution, we need to use the t-table kasi madami siya. Okay? Alright, so let's proceed. Okay, so for this class, I'll be giving you a minute or two to answer this on your end. Okay, so I'll be giving you a minute or two to answer this. So, like 3 minutes. Then I will i-pause nyo na muna yung video. Okay, and then later on, sasabihin ko yung sagot sa kada number para ma-practice nyo. Yeah. I-pause nyo muna yung video. Pwede nyo i-pause muna yung video. Then, pag ready mayroon na kayong sagot, i-continue nyo na yung video. Okay. Alright. Now, to check whether your answer is correct, let me inform or let me tell you the answer for each item. Okay? Alright, so for number 1, the answer is, the t-value is 2.898. Okay, so number 1, the t-value is 2. So let me write it here. So for number 1, the t-value is 2.898. All right. Number 2, the t-value is 2.074. All right. Next, for number 3, the t-value is 2.624. All right. Next, for number 4, we have 1.833. And for number 5, the t-value is 2.093. So I hope na tama yung mga sagot natin. Okay? So those are the answers for this activity. Right? So I'm hoping na tama yung mga sagot nyo. Alright, so let's proceed. Alright, so let's proceed with example number 10. For example number 10, let's compute now for the margin of error of the 90% confidence interval estimate of the population mean, for the population mean when S is 5 and N is 16. So, for the margin of error, ano ba yung kailangan natin ng mga given? Okay, so we need to check our formula. So, sa margin of error, ang kailangan natin doon na given ay yung sample standard deviation, which is S. Given na siya. Yung N, okay, given na din dito sa ating problem. And the t-value. So, kailangan natin yung tatlong yon given for us to solve the margin of error. Okay. So, kung mapapansin natin, yung ating N is 16, so it's less than 30. So, this is intended for t-distribution. So, yung formula na margin of error for the t-distribution, yung gagamitin natin. Okay, so, solution tayo. Let's proceed with the solution. So, kailangan natin, again, hanapin yung t-value nito. Kasi nga, t-distribution yung t-distribution ito. Intended siya for t-distribution. Okay? So, kailangan natin yung t-value para ma-solve natin yung margin of error. Alright. So, for this, ano ba yung t-value? Kasi meron na tayong sample standard deviation. Meron na din tayo ng sample size. So, kanina, naging activity natin siya. So, using the t-distribution table, since it's 90% confidence level, so our alpha is 0.05. Okay. 0.10 rather. Alright? So, using our calculator, divide lang natin siya by yung alpha natin by 2.10 divided by 2. So, that would be 0.05. So, on the upper top, okay, so let me show you. Ito kasi siya na nahuli. Okay, so we have here 0.05. Okay, and our degrees of freedom is 15. Since our sample size is 16, so 16 minus 1, our degrees of freedom is 15. So the intersection, we have here 1.753. So that is our t-value. So we already have the t-value. So substitute lang natin lahat ng ating given sa ating formula. So we will have here so again, this is our formula for margin of error. So t alpha over 2 df. Okay. So nakalimutan ko yung df. A comma df times s over square root of n. So that is 1.753 times 5 over square root of 16. So that would give you 1.753 times 5 over square root of 16. Your answer is 2.19125. Okay? Or approximately 2.19. So, on our class, okay, so magbibigay naman siguro ng instructions yung sa subject teacher nyo if you will round it off to the nearest hundreds or the like. So, on our class, sabi ko, they need to round it off to the nearest hundreds. Okay, so may instructions naman on your exam, on your problem sets or long test if the margin of error and the standard error will be rounded off to nearest hundreds or Okay, so it depends on the instructions naman. Okay. So let's proceed. Okay, let's proceed with example number 11. So we have here the volume of 15 randomly selected bottles of muriatic acid or 95, 110, 88, 95, 65, 75, 92, 77, 105, 115, 102, 88, 108, 105, and 70 ounces. Find 95% confidence interval for the mean volume of muriatic acid, assuming an approximately normal distribution for the population of the muriatic acid contents. Okay, so as you can see here, class, you are presented by a raw data. Okay, and your task is to find the 95% confidence interval for the mean. Okay, mean volume of muriatic acid. So, ano yung kailangan natin i-check dito? Of course, yung sample size. Yung sample size natin here is 15. Okay? So, it's less than 30. So, this is for T distribution. Okay. Provided na ba yung sample mean? Kasi ang kailangan natin dito is the confidence interval. So, we'll be using the confidence interval formula for the unknown population standard deviation. Okay. For the T distribution na formula nga. So, ano yung mga kailangan natin na given? First is the sample mean. Meron na ba tayong sample mean dito? Wala pa. So, we still need to compute for the sample mean. What else? We need the t-value. Okay? So, wala pa tayong t-value dito. And the last is the sample standard deviation. Okay? So, yun yung kailangan natin. Now, if you will utilize your resources, since online naman tayo, you can check on YouTube, okay? At you can check sa YouTube yung tutorial on how to use the calculator and finding the mean and standard deviation provided by a raw data, okay? Pero meron naman itong mano-mano, pero it will be easier for you, okay, if you will just utilize your calculator. So, iba-iba kasi tayo ng model ng calculator. So, what I do suggest for you, class, okay, is for you to check, okay, on YouTube, okay, a tutorial in finding the mean and standard deviation using your model calculator. Okay, so ang gagawin nyo doon, actually, input nyo lang yung data like 95, 110, and then lalabas na yung mean and sample mean and yung sample standard deviation. Again, since provided tayo ng raw data, we will use here the notation na S. Kasi meron din kayo makikitang sigma and then S. Okay, so ang gagamitin natin ay yung S. Okay, for sample standard deviation. But let me present to you kung paano naman to minamano-mano. Okay, di ba, if you can still remember, on your junior high school, na-discuss nyo naman yung paghanap ng means. Isa siya sa measures of central tendency, yung paghanap ng mean. Okay? So yung formula natin is i-add lang natin lahat ng data na meron tayo. So we have 95 plus 110 plus 88, and so on and so forth, hanggang 70. And divide natin by the total number of observations, that is 15. So we will have here 95 plus, and so on and so forth. So we'll have 92.7. Now, please take note of the rounding rule. Okay? Rounding rule that we have for the mean and standard deviation. So you need to add one more decimal place to the original data. So since our data is in whole number, you need to add one more decimal place. So you will have here, you need to round it off to the nearest tenths. That's why our answer here is 92.7. Okay? Pero again, class, meron ng madaling proseso nito using your calculator din. Pero i-input nyo na lang siya. So isa lalabas yung sample mean at yung sample standard deviation na kailangan natin. Okay, so let's proceed with, so we already have the sample mean. Okay, next is finding the sample standard deviation. So ito yung formula natin. Kung mamanu-manuin natin to, matatagalan tayo. Okay, matatagalan tayo. Kasi yung process nito, okay, so we know for a fact that it is just the square root of the variance. So this is our formula for the variance. Kung i-say natin to, eto ganito yung mangyayari. Okay? So that would be the summation of x minus x bar squared over n minus 1. So ano ba yung x na sinasabi natin dito? Ito yung data natin. So we have here 95. Okay, so we will have here 95 minus x with a bar on top. So that is our sample mean. Okay, so we have here, na-compute natin kanina, that's 92.7 squared plus, next natin, so i-isay natin siya. Paano kung mayroon kayong 30? So madami kayong medyo ma-process. Kaya sinasabi ko sa inyo class, if you have time, please watch a tutorial wherein you can find the mean and standard deviation easier, okay? Using your calculator, your model calculator. So we have here 100, ano nga yung pangalawa? 110. So 110 minus 92.7 squared and plus and so on and so forth hanggang matapos natin hanggang 70 minus 92.7 squared divided by n minus 1. So our n is 15, so that would be 15 minus 1. So, isa-isahin natin siya. Pero again, if meron tayong alam sa paggamit ng calculator, then hindi nyo na ito gagawing mano-mano. Pero yan yung mano-mano niya, para meron din kayong alternative. Okay? So, you will have there 15.4. So, again, you need to round it off to the nearest tenths then. Kasi yung, again, yung ating data or raw data is in whole number. So, our final answer should be rounded off to the nearest tenths. Okay, so meron na tayong sample mean, meron na tayong sample standard deviation. The next is finding the t-value. Okay, so using again our t-distribution table, so what is our t-value? So that would be 2.145. Since it's 95%, our alpha or two tails is 5% or 0.05. Our degrees of freedom is 15 minus 1, that's 14. So so for the one tail, okay, so that would be 0.05 divided by 2, so that would be 0.02514. The intersection of the one tail, 0.025, and 14 is 2.145. So we already have all the given. So all we need to do is substitute it to our formula. Okay, so this is our formula. Okay, so substitute natin. So we will have 92.7 minus 2.145 times 15.4 over square root of 15. So that is for our lower limit. So again, class, you need to be careful. Doon pa lang sa pag-apply ng rounding rule sa mean and sample standard deviation. Okay? Kasi if mali yung nalagay natin na value, hindi natin na round off, hindi natin na-apply yung rounding rule sa sample mean as well as sa sample mean and sample standard deviation, baka magkakaroon tayo ng difference na baka result. Okay? So make sure to follow the rounding rule that we have for the sample mean and variance as well as the standard deviation. Okay. Next is, we need to use our calculator. 92.7 minus 2.145 times 15.4 over square root of 15. So that will give you 84.17091.607. Now, the rounding rule we have for the t distribution, okay, is the same as for the z distribution. So since again we are provided by raw data, so we need to add one more decimal place to the original data. So our final answer should be rounded off also to the nearest tenths. So we will have here the final answer as 84.2. So again, the rounding rule we have for the t distribution is the same with the z distribution. So I already presented or already discussed the rounding rule for the z distribution as well. Okay, so that you can check that again on our previous video. So for the lower limit, we have 84.2, and for the upper limit, so you just need to replace subtraction by addition. So you will have your 101.2290839. Again, applying the rounding rule, that's 101.2. So since again, you are presented by a row data, you need to add one more decimal place to the original data. And our original data on our example is in a whole number. Therefore, our final answer should be rounded off to the nearest tenths. Okay? So, therefore, with 95% confidence, the volumes are 84.2 ounces and 101.2 ounces based on the randomly selected. All right. So again, class, if you have questions or clarifications with regards to this lecture video, don't hesitate to write that on your notebook and ask that on your subject teacher. All right, so let's proceed with another example. So dito naman, presented na tayo ng mean at sample standard deviation. So next, 10 randomly selected automobiles were stopped and the tread depth of the right front tire was measured. The mean was 0.32 inch and the standard deviation was 0.08 inch. Find the 95% confidence interval of the mean depth. Assume that the variable is approximately normally distributed. Okay, so please take note of our given. So our sample size is 10. Our mean is 0.32 and the standard deviation is 0.08. So ano nang lang ang kailangan natin? All we need is the t-value. Okay? So the t-value na lang yung kailangan natin. So 95% confidence interval siya. So that would be for the alpha, that's 0.05 divided by 2. So that would be 0.025. That's for the one tail. And our DF or degrees of freedom is 9. So the intersection of that is 2.262. If you will check that on your table, again, the degrees of the t-value is 2.262. So we already have all the given. Substitute lang natin sa ating formula. So ito yung formula ulit natin. X with a bar on top or the sample mean minus the t-value times S over square root of n for the lower limit, and for the upper limit, x with a bar on top plus t-value times s over square root of n. Okay. So we have here 0.32 minus 2.262 times 0.08 over square root of 10. So 0.32 minus 2.262 times 0.08 over square root of 10. So that will give you, alright, so ito yung magiging result na makukuha natin sa calculator. That's 0.2627754,235. Okay, now applying the rounding rule since presented na tayo ng mean. Okay, so the same as the mean yung decimal places na final answer natin, magiging final answer natin. Therefore, our final answer here is 0.26. Now, for the upper limit, you just need to change again the subtraction by addition. So we'll have your 0.3772245,765. Yun yung makukuha natin sa calculator. But again, applying the rounding rule, you need to round it off the same as the decimal places we have for the mean. And that is in the nearest hundred. So our final answer should be 0.38 for the upper limit. All right, so therefore, with 95% confidence, the mean depth are 0.26 inch and 0.38 inch based on the randomly selected. So that is for the t distribution. So let's have some recap. So when to use z or t distribution? Again, so paano pag yung ating population standard deviation is known? So gagamitin natin ay yung z distribution. Yeah, pag hindi naman t-distribution, paano naman pag yung sample size natin ay greater than or equal to 30? So that's for z distribution. Okay? And if hindi, then that would be t-distribution. Okay? So that would be the difference between the two. All right, so that would be for the second part of our lecture video.